Well, welcome to another video. This video is quite a serious one. It's to do with the cost of net zero. And I've written a paper, the links to which are below this, which goes into detail. And it looks at the cost of having net zero in the next 5 years to 2030 and the cost if we hadn't got it, if it wasn't there. Yes? And the difference is enormous. It's actually between 151 billion to 234 billion pounds a year. Average, we come out with around about the 200 billion a year cost of having net zero. That might amaze some people because you'll often hear it's 30 billion a year and things like this. Not so. And the paper details every part of how that calculation's done, and it's below this. But I have to also put that paper into some perspective and put the amount we're spending on net zero into perspective. Now, because we can spend over £1 trillion on net zero in the next 5 years, if you like, that's an enormous amount of money. And I want to look at some figures here that might shock you because the country is in a serious economic state. But the point I want to make is this. All this huge amounts of money being spent on net zero, averaging, on my calculations, about £200 billion a year, is borrowed. Yeah, we're borrowing to do it. And not only that, we've been borrowing ever since this scam started, if you like. And that is a really important point to look at. And I'm quickly going to deal with some basic economic matters to do with the UK that are very concerning indeed. It basically means we're going to be plunged into almost third world status. We're going to have to be rescued by other countries like the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. We're going to go back to the 70s when we were rescued then, but we're in a worse state than then, much worse. So let's look at the national debt first. This is a graph of the sovereign debt of the UK, how much the government owes, how much it's borrowed and how much it owes. And it's expressed as a percentage of the gross domestic product. So starting back way here, it was in the 25%. So the economy actually generated, if you like, wealth and borrowed about 25% of that. And you can see how it rose. Now this period here are the Blair years to 2010. They inherited a pretty good situation, and then as soon as they got hold of the economy, they just borrowed and borrowed and borrowed. After that period, we had the coalition period from 2010, which they carried on borrowing because it was a sort of the same principle. They were almost following Blairite policies, and so our percentage of what we borrowed grew and grew and grew. After that, we had the Conservative era, where the gain we borrowed, and of course we had the big bump here with COVID, and we just borrowed like mad. And finally, last of all, we had this last year with Labour here. In June 2025, just that month, the government borrowed 20.7 billion from the markets, but 16.4 billion of that was to pay interest on the debt that we already had. That's 79% of the borrowing to pay the interest on a debt that's still there growing. Now, I'll just keep those few figures on the screen to explain this. We've all heard of people with a credit card debt who open a new credit card to pay off the old credit card because they're in trouble. That's unsustainable. You can't keep doing that. You just build it up. But at least they pay it off. This government, not even doing that. It's much worse what this government are doing. They're borrowing money to pay the interest without touching the original debt, which is still there growing. This is bankruptcy personified. This is a bankrupt country does that. That's banana state stuff. And that's what this country is now doing, because we won't face reality economically and because we have an illiterate government as regards economics. And in particular, our Chancellor is just honestly completely, totally out of her depth. But, we have to face reality sooner than later, and it's going to be forced on the country. The IMF and others are going to come, and they're going to impose draconian measures on the country to get us back to sanity. And this is an unsustainable system. Now, really, I hope everyone reads the paper that I've written to do with the cost of net zero and how much it is. And I've considered the case of having no net zero policies at all as if we were normal, and the case of having the net zero. And the difference is in the order of £1 trillion in the next 5 years. all of which is borrowed, of course, traditionally, before now, or during now. So that's where we are, and I will just leave you with a few more thoughts, because I try to keep the videos short these days, and I put all the emphasis on the detail in the paper I've written. So here we go. Let's just now look at what we call the sovereign debt, because even that's an illusion. This is a graph of our sovereign debt. That's the blue part here, and that pink part, what's that? Well, that's what they forgot to count. They've just hidden it. And that's the pension obligation on the public sector that the government owes. It's a debt of the governments. That's how much they're obliged to pay. That is a debt. But they hide it. And that, well, it makes the sovereign debt ridiculous. It's much, much higher than you first think. This is like cheating accounting. This is like when you're counting how much you owe, you forget the mortgage. It's a bit like that. And so, or you forget your other obligations, big obligations, and there it is, approaching twice the GDP. This is, again, banana state sort of republic economics. There is just one more thing I might add before I depart this video, and it's another thing to add on, and that is where the government had the great idea of getting private industry to build infrastructure, and then they owed a debt to the private industry to build it. It was a very expensive way of doing it, by the way, and I'm not for nationalisation, don't think that for one moment, but the way that's been done is ridiculous. And that adds another element of debt that the government's obliged to pay. So I'll now add that with this graph. It's just that top green bit there, not as big as the pensions. And you can see we are really heading for almost twice the GDP in national debt. This is unsustainable. And net zero has been a major contribution to it. And as we proceed forward, would make the situation much worse. So reality is going to happen. Reality is going to come in whether this government likes it or not. And that reality is going to happen quite soon, I think in the next year or so. And that will maybe be the end of this government as we know it. That is what's happening. I'm almost want more time to build up the party I now belong to, which is Advance UK. I almost want more time to build that up, because that is the real party which will have solutions to conquer this. And it ain't going to be a nice time for anyone, this. We've got to sort it. We've got to live within our means, and we're just not doing it. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I'm sorry it was such a dismal video, this, but a sad one. But it's true, we have to be truthful. And just like I try to get to the truth with the net zero nonsense, I also try to get to the truth of what we're facing as an economy. I think this may have shocked some people. I hope it has, because we've got to realise the mess we're in. Thank you for watching.